So we have Cheryl Dennis, our recording secretary. We have WinCam with us, bringing us live to millions of viewers, and we will open the planning board meeting for Tuesday, October 15th. With a roll call vote, we will have we'll be recording. So if you don't want to be recorded, turn off your camera and your microphone. And for a roll call vote, Diab Jarius.
Present.
Ryan Vernelia.
Present.
Nick Rosettos.
Present.
And John Cortizas.
Here.
And I am Carrie Layton, and I am here as well. So we are convened. Does anybody have updates?
I could give an update, which is that I submitted the memo that you guys all should have seen that you authorized me to send to the select board. They potentially are considering it tonight, though it was not in their packet. They do have it as ARPA funding as an agenda item. I know that one of the select board members at their meeting last Thursday asked if they were going to consider it, and they said they were going to put it off till tonight. So it's possible they will consider it. I've had conversations with several members of the select board, which I'll just keep between myself and them. But I'm hopeful that if they don't agree to fund it tonight, that they'll help us find a way to fund it so that we don't have to wait all the way till Springtown meeting to get it funded. But more to come on that, shall I say.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for sticking with that. Any other updates? I've got one or two. So there's a meeting that was scheduled for the Town Meeting Members Association to sort of walk down Main Street and get a sense with boots on the ground of what the North Main rezoning bylaw would look like. And it was scheduled for Monday morning at 9. And Ian and I did our prep work on Friday, making sure we had a mental inventory of historic parcels, and we sort of had our idea of where to pause, and then it got rained out, and Ian cannot join us on the 20th, but it is postponed to the rain date, which will be Sunday, October 20th at 9 a.m. So hopefully we have good attendance and we can get questions answered for town meeting members. If you are watching this and you're a town meeting member, consider yourself invited. I mean, I think anyone's welcome to attend. So if we get questions from anyone, have them come on out. I think it'll be good for them to sort of stand in front of buildings and see what we have planned.
Gary, is there a starting point for the tour?
Yeah, we're gonna try to park at Creative Corner and assemble at the corner of Cross and Main. I think someone was trying to get in touch with the owner of Creative Corner, and it should be posted to the Town Meeting Member Association page. And you're a town meeting member, right, DM? So if you haven't gotten an email about it, now I'm concerned. You should have seen chatter about this.
They sent out an update stating that
no.
it had been rain date and stuff. So I got one.
Okay.
I don't know if you got it yet.
I did. I just thought it for our general public who would like to attend.
Yes.
Knowing, so 9:30.
No,
Cross
not, I
and
think
Main.
9
a.m. I'm sorry. I can't remember what you said 15 seconds ago.
No, I wouldn't assume it's correct. 9, yep. So October 20th, 9 a.m.
Okay.
And yes, we are trying to make sure we have permission from Creative Corner to use their parking lot, but since the preschool is not in business, and then if we'll sort of walk down to the end of the area affected by the bylaw, and then if folks want to be shuttled back up, we'll that has been offered by Lance. I don't know who's doing the shuttling, but I think it'll go fine. And Jack will be with us to help with the historic building question. Ooh. What is the right time to bring this up? North Main, I think. I'm gonna hold off on one other thing I need to update you on. Other updates. John, I heard from the housing or have you been in touch with Housing Partnership?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I told them
go
about
ahead.
the meeting tomorrow, and presenting the plan for North Main.
Okay, great, good. Okay, good. You've caught up there. I also offered to be on hand if they have questions. I'm totally happy to let you take the lead. You're our liaison there. They also will have questions about ADUs. We know that will be something we'll get lots of questions on. So hopefully we can hear some feedback and offer some answers to how we got there. Anything else for updates? Taylor, anything from town hall?
I don't think so.
Economic development stuff, anything else?
We were originally planning on having the joint planning board select board meeting for the housing production plan on the 28th, which would be next Monday. It doesn't look like that's going to happen. I need to make sure with the team tomorrow that is for sure the case, but I think I'm 95% sure that it's not going to happen. So I'll update.
They can't make it, or
it's just they just aren't done, and we don't want you voting on something that's not done.
Okay.
So because that's the case, we're really looking until December that vote's going to happen. Once I get that confirmation tomorrow afternoon, I'll give more of an update by email.
Yep. On that note, I'd be a little concerned, even if they were done, giving this board essentially less than a week to review this very long, detailed document, I think is a difficult ask. So
If it matters, the 28th is 2 Mondays from now, but I still think all of that sounds like it doesn't matter. It's okay.
Do we need
I'm not sure what
October
draft
is
of this,
busting for
or-
me, so what's that?
I'm just wondering if we need the draft. Adia was concerned that we have the draft in advance, and I'm wondering when is the right time to see a draft.
Well, it sounds like it's not, the draft is not, the holdup is that the draft is not done. Am I hearing that correctly, Taylor?
Yeah, that's correct. If any draft is going to be passed out, I mean, I haven't even seen it. So if any draft is going to be passed out, I mean, we are looking to after town meeting,
Right.
before that happens.
Okay, hopefully we'll have some version of it before town meeting so we can give a bit of an update, at least on the status, but we won't digest anything or have a vote to report.
Would we plan on discussing it as a committee before we did the joint meeting, or would be the plan the first time we discuss it as a committee being in a joint meeting?
my preference would be that we review it before we go to the select board.
Yeah, as long as that doesn't break any protocol, I think that's a good idea, because they'll have questions and we should have one answer instead of 5. And some time to pre-digest.
Taylor, so it's fair to say we can take that off our calendar then on the 28th.
I'm fairly sure, yes, but I will get that confirmation tomorrow afternoon.
Okay.
We do have an economic development working group meeting tomorrow,
Right.
which isn't really an update.
It's an update. It's an update to
It's-
wait for an update.
It's a future update.
Yeah, that's great. The predate. Okay, anybody else with an update? There's an overdue permanent street tree committee meeting on Friday, which has a brisk agenda, if anyone wants to hop into that. I'm buckled up for that one. Anything else? We have we have a public hearing that is coming up on the 29th. Now that we're getting all the dates wrong, I just want to confirm our public hearing is on the 29th, right?
That's correct.
So we're gonna
What's that?
just a public hearing to present North Main as, to the public. We'll also be discussing a couple of items that evening, including the ledges, which we're gonna discuss this evening, although it's something that we'll need to bring up during the public hearing. And we also have a discussion of whether or not we can vote, I think, tonight on the stretch energy code, whether or not to support that article for town meeting. There are a few other articles that are things we may potentially want to weigh in on that I think are not going to be particularly time consuming or urgent. But does anyone have
So will the 29th be a regular planning board meeting from
The
7
first-
to 9:30? Or,
the first hour of it will be a public hearing.
okay, but
but
we'll,
we'll
but
need
we'll be
quorum
here
for
for the
that.
full, okay. I mean, we'll be here for 7 to 9:30, basically.
Right, and it starts at what time? Starts at 7 as usual, right?
Yeah, the public hearing is just 7 to 8.
7 to 8.
Okay, and then we continue our business from 8 to 9. Okay,
Mhm.
thank
So
you.
I'm a little confused about the purpose of the public hearing. It's not on the warrant. The warrant articles are frozen.
Yep.
So is this just an informational hearing, or is this, and this is sort of like for town meeting members?
That's
And the
correct.
public, right?
So it's not really a public hearing, it's an information. When I hear public hearing, I think of something which is tied to some legislative effort that we're required to do by law. If this is
Mhm.
just an
Well, we are
informational hearing.
required to do that. We are required to do this by law. Right? It's
But-
all because we didn't do, this is our public hearing for our warrant articles, North Main, ADU, and then the ledges, all that.
But we did public hearings prior to submitting the final language. And you did a presentation on North Main Street with Michael,
Mhm.
and that didn't count as our public hearing.
It wasn't advertised as a public hearing.
Okay. It seems really late. That's all. I
It
mean,
is
town
very
meetings-
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
that's why
something that we don't have any plan of replicating again.
Yeah, I just didn't know if that was legal. It was so late. That's all.
It is. We checked.
Okay.
Okay, anything else before we move on to the next agenda item? Okay, so our next item on the agenda is to vote on whether or not we as a planning board choose to support the stretch energy code, which will be an article presented at town meeting. We had Ken Pruitt present to us on this, and then the board had asked for the language of the final article to review before we voted. Is there a motion regarding the stretch energy code, or is there anything that people want to, do you have your hands up?
Just basically, what's the real short, I guess, summary of it?
The stretch energy code, do you have your hands up? Do you want to? Feel like
I'm sorry, I might just be clicking, but I tried to read the state code just to make sure that the provisions that Ken mentioned were in there. So it's the it's the specialized stretch energy code, which includes some new provisions for houses, new residential houses. And so
Right.
if you're less than 4,000 square feet, you can use you could go for a mixed fuel option, but require a solar offset. All houses would have to be pre-wired for electric in any case. If you're over 4,000 square feet, it doesn't look like you have the mixed fuel option. And if you're over 12,000 square feet, you have to go for a passive house. That's the takeaway.
Okay.
I thought,
And
excuse me, Diab, I'm sorry, I thought that if you were north of 4,000 feet, you needed to offset. If you had a gas appliance, you were required to offset it.
well, that's a
Versus
good question. So
less than 4,000, you had to, I believe, kind of pre-wire for solar.
everybody has,
a less of an obligation, I thought.
so, it's a bit of a mess, but, I don't know. I think my thing is broken. I don't know if I can share screen.
There's a chart. So, um,
Yeah, the actual warrant article essentially says we're adopting what the states for the specialized stretch code. So, and then if you go into, and that's, it refers you back to 225 CMR, and there is a stretch. Did you say there's a table?
if you hold on, there is a table. I don't. Let me see.
Yeah. Okay. So there is a, if you go to section Appendix RC, and it says new dwelling units. So new dwelling units will be net zero buildings and comply with sections R404.4, which is EV wiring, and either section R405, passive house, or section R406, HERS. And then it has a special call out for new dwelling units over 4,000 square feet, which
Mhm.
essentially only allow you to go through zero energy pathway or all electric pathway. There's a third pathway, which is called the mixed fuel pathway, which seems to be available to units under 4,000 square feet. And if you are greater than 12,000 square feet, you have to go through passive house building certification and any of the pathways which are zero energy, all electric, or mixed fuel. So that's on page, there are no page numbers on this document. That's annoying.
Mhm.
But I could try sharing, but I highly doubt it's going to work.
Uh, Did that help whoever had the, John, you were trying to clarify what was required for sizes, right?
I think I'm comfortable, that I understand
Yeah, I don't think my share works anymore.
been through it.
I sort of went through different towns have different, like Shutesbury did a really nice job of creating a PowerPoint around it. So they're looking at the HERS ratings and when things will need to be implemented. Um,
Yeah, I mean, there's the key questions that I had from the last time was when Ken discussed what buildings it applied to and what they were required to do, and I didn't realize that it's buried in the extended or the specialized code. So
mhm.
that's what I was looking at, and it certainly seems like it is. The new stuff is only going to be required for new construction.
Renovations and significant additions, I think. The mixed fuel new homes would be, they're set to different. Actually, they're not set to different HERS qualifications. The mixed fuel new homes for any size can use passive house adoption, or for 4,000. The way this chart has it set up, no matter what the size is, they have to hit the HERS 42 stretch code standard by, if it's after July of 2024. And they don't, oh, okay, so the solar PV minimum 4 kilowatt would be for under 4,000, and solar PV to net zero would be 4,000 square feet and over with wiring for electrification.
I thought,
Maybe that's what they have now and they're moving it to HERS 42. And this is not I don't know.
I thought Ken, in his presentation, really, and when I spoke to him, my understanding was that this was strictly for new construction. You know, you're starting, you tear it all down. It wasn't you're adding on to your house, even a large addition.
Okay,
That's,
back to the,
that's my impression from reading the code as well, is that it only talks about new construction for the specialized stretch. For the additions, it goes to the, back to the original stretch. So
Right.
applicability, yeah, so I think
Hold on,
that's,
I'm
that's,
finding
yeah,
I agree with that. Well, although I agree with that's what was represented. And in fact, Ken has been colloquially referring to it as the new construction code, even though that's not what it's called, to make it clear that it's only new construction. But so that's what he said. That was what was represented, but it could be incorrect.
Right. I
Okay,
mean,
yeah,
he made the point that it wasn't, you know, renovation, even major renovation. It was a new build.
okay, yeah, you're right. I'm
That's-
looking at the,
that's what I see directly in the state regs, as they say, they explicitly call out existing residential buildings shall comply with Chapter 5 of the Stretch Energy Code, which is the old existing one, new residential buildings, and then they have to do all the new stuff. So there's all of the compliance and applicability is to new construction, completely new construction, not additions,
Right. And not renovations or,
not renovations.
right. Additions, renovations. New.
Yeah, those are under the less specialized.
design and
So
construction.
I'm good
Okay.
to, if I'm good to move that we recommend to town meeting to vote for favorable action or passage of the the specialized stretch energy code under, do we actually have town meeting warrant numbers on this thing yet?
There was a draft. This is not,
Yeah,
I think
It is
it's
available.
26.
chapter 26 specialized energy code,
No, but the
Okay.
actual
No,
warrant
no, that's not it.
article,
not the warrant article.
the warrant article, something earlier. It's
well, I think we're,
Yeah,
rather
I
than dig
hesitate
that
in
out,
case the draft changes. I hesitate to vote if we don't have a final version.
yeah, so why don't I just say, I move that the planning board endorse the specialized code warrant article as approved by the Climate Action Advisory Committee on 10/10/24. 9/23/24 and 10/10/24.
Okay, great. Thank
I'll
you.
second that.
Great, thanks, Brian. But is there further discussion on the matter? Okay, by roll call vote, Diab,
Aye,
Brian,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Nick?
Aye.
I'm an aye on this one as well, so we vote to support unanimously. Great. The next one that we need to discuss, but I think not vote on is the ledges. Do we vote on that one this evening? I
No,
think we need to vote on that during the public hearing. But we wanted to make sure everyone was up to date on what's happening with the ledges. So the ledges is a multifamily development that's over like on Wainwright. And what they want to do is take a parcel, take a parcel from their planned residential development, which is referred to as the ledges, and they want to convert the zoning from the PRD, where I think it's currently being used as open space, to a single family zoning. Is it RA20 or I don't remember RB, but to convert it to a single family housing parcel. I will anecdotally, not quite anecdotally, I will say, while it's currently, I don't, there's no structure on it now, right? It's being used as open space. So the Ledges is adjacent to Sucker Brook, and so I know the Ledges fairly well from the time on Concom. They are wonderful neighbors. You know, red flags go off whenever open space is sacrificed in this town because, you know, I think it's so important to the town to maintain open spaces, but they are wonderful neighbors to the Sucker Brook Conservation Area. They have reserved a number of their parcels. They're a bit behind on doing this. I think they're like 40 years late on this, per David Miller. To convert a number of units that are adjacent to Sucker Brook as a conservation restriction to make sure that they protect that open land. And they have always been great about maintaining access to the open space for their residents and working on, you know, sort of trail safety and trail maintenance to make sure that the Sucker Brook area is preserved and protected. If you've never been over there, it's lovely. It's like really interesting geology. So I'm assuming this is just to sort of raise money. I don't know why they're converting this one. The goal of the planned residential development overlay district was to encourage multifamily housing, which worked for that area. And I don't know, I hope either Taylor or Diab can give me some insight and the board some insight into what the PRD specifically allows single family houses, but I'm assuming it binds them to sort of sidewalk restriction, you know, sort of the criteria that are expected to be met by the zoning of the PRD. But other than that, I'm not sure why the switch is helpful or what's prohibited by keeping it in the overlay. So
I recall having, I guess we had a discussion at some point. And I don't recall all the particulars other than it seemed like it would be okay for them to do this. That there weren't any issues that I recall.
yeah, it's a parcel adjacent to a residential area, so it's not sort of putting it up against the open space that I talked about. That's called Sucker Brook. John, were you going to add something?
No.
Okay. Diab, Taylor, any thoughts on what we gain or lose by changing the zoning?
I hadn't appreciated the fact that the PRD allowed single families. And so I'm wondering, do we have the original subdivision before us? I mean, I saw there's an excerpt that we got from the condo. Was that the HOA excerpt we got, or was that from the actual subdivision? Or,
Would
decision?
this have gone through subdivision? I don't think it would have gone through subdivision.
Well, they had to put new roads in. And
But
you can't put a,
isn't the point of the overlay to simplify the process of building multifamily housing?
yeah, but I think there's still you're actually taking a land or a big lot and you are chopping it, maybe because it's a single. Well, so there is an agreement though. We saw, okay, so let's get back to, we were given, where is that? We were given several pages of that were scanned.
Yep.
And that doesn't identify the document this comes out of. So this is an agreement between the town and so this sounds like, you know, there's some sort of agreement between the town and the Ledges, which was done prior to, so this looks like a decision from a subdivision. Right? You wouldn't, if it were just by right and it was just a PRD, you could go in and do whatever you want. So there's some sort of a decision was made. Is that part of the PRD? I'm trying to, I didn't. And so the other question I have is, so this is PRD. Where the heck? I just had it.
So 8.6 is the PRD.
And I just scrolled past it. Okay.
The permitted uses in the PRD may include single-family homes, garden apartments, and townhouses of 3 stories or less, open space, private recreational facilities. I don't know if it's that the And then there's the general standards. So I don't know if it's to release them from,
Okay, so so they have to go through, this has to go through the ZBA. Planning board will review all applications, report its recommendations to the ZBA. A PRD may only be constructed after rezoning and under a special permit. Okay, so what we're probably seeing is an excerpt from the decision by the ZBA regarding the PRD. I want to make sure I understand. I mean, the only reason I would think of if a single family is allowed, then they probably, if you buy the lot, you're not subject to the HOA.
I mean, that would, I'm sure, increase the property value.
I don't. Does it have access off a public road?
I think it's on Wainwright, isn't it? Wait, let me see.
It is.
There's a map in one of the documents. I think it's, one of the petitions has a map
on
and shows where the lot is
Yeah.
located.
Wainwright at Red Coach Lane. So
You
it
know-
would be adjacent to an kind of an inner road, it looks like, of the development.
I'd be, it wasn't clear to me what their plans were, but if that parcel is owned by the association, I don't know exactly what the process is from slicing it off. I'd just imagine there are a lot of lien holders. And, anything that would affect value, the deed, I'm sure they got it worked out. I'm not sure we care, but be one thing to develop something they already own, it'd be another thing to start selling pieces off. They might feel it. A lender might reasonably think it's undermining the value, but I'm sure they have thought of that. Easier to leave it a part of the association.
Yeah, but if they're going to slice it into another, if they want, okay, so dimensional requirements. I'm looking, the only place that I see the PRD has to be in dimensional requirements. I don't actually see anything in the PRD which says what kind of housing is there. So am I missing it?
What kind of housing is allowed, or what kind of housing is it?
Yeah, I'm looking at eight whatever, and I see all sorts of things, but nothing about.
Well, 864 is standards and uses.
Okay, so I'm obviously missing it. Oh, I'm sorry, I completely scanned over that. It may include single family homes. So there's no density, is there in here? It's common ownership. More than one building is permanent on tracts of lots.
I mean, there's separation minimums, there's percent of building height.
Yeah. So one of the things you mentioned, Carrie, is that there were lots along this conservation area that they are going to put conservation easements on.
Yeah, they were gonna put some of the land that's officially part of the ledges, they were going to put a conservation restriction on it to protect the part that borders, not this part. They were gonna put it on a part that borders the ledges. I'm sorry, that borders Sucker Brook. I just think of them as generally a good neighbor to open spaces. I don't necessarily think it speaks to the goal of the PRD.
Right. Yeah, I'm just wondering if they're, whether they're built out. And so I was trying to understand your
Uh,
comment, whether this was land that could be built upon and they're
Yeah, this is
reserving.
separate from from those parcels. This is on the street. The ledge is kind of, there's the street and
Yeah,
then there's the inner roads and the parcels that are designated for the once and future conservation restriction are not adjacent to this parcel. I think this is just like a, field in between homes.
yeah, my question actually was about the parcels you're talking about for future conservation area.
Mhm.
Are those currently buildable?
I mean,
Or are the,
suppose they're technically, it's a good way to put it. It's a good question. Let me see if there's, I kind of revised our,
I mean,
uh,
I guess the reason I'm asking is I'm trying to, I think
I
John
think
raised
they
a
are
good.
built. I think they are currently. Am I sort of like I revisited it with David Miller, who I think is still chair of Concom, to make sure I was fresh on their relationship with Sucker Brook, and he worded it adjacent lots that they own are to be placed in a conservation restriction. But that was supposed to be true 40 years ago, and I don't think it's done yet. So they're pretty good neighbors.
Yeah, but John raised the question of why they can't do what they want to do within their existing framework. And that raises question in my mind if they are built out or not built out. If this land is, I mean, one of the things in that snippet of document we got was that they are required to maintain somewhere in there, it says something about maintaining green space.
Mm-hmm.
These portions of the common open space shown on the plans as unimproved areas shall be kept in an open and natural state. So
It
is
releases
this
them.
in one of those areas that was
No.
supposedly set aside at the time, or is
This
this
is
in an area?
This is not one of those parcels, but I don't know if this open space parcel is required to stay open space by the PRD. They're not adjacent to each other.
Right, right. I understood.
Yeah.
But in my mind, if this were a part of the PRD, which was designated as open space,
Mm-hmm.
or I should say, they
Unimproved.
call it unimproved areas. So if this was originally an unimproved area, then they're seeking to change the use, which I
Okay.
think is a little different from saying, hey, we've got some area that we could develop, we haven't developed it yet, and we want to sell it because for some reason that's to our financial benefit.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would be concerned if this were a change of use from an open area to a housing development.
Mm-hmm.
So
And
there,
without,
I think I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. This is really a two-step process. Nothing can change about the PRD. They can't change. They can't add more housing. They can't change anything without going to town meeting anyway, right? That'd be like
Mhm,
changing the central business district. You can't do that
mhm,
without going to town meeting and getting the the permission. So what they're doing is essentially asking for two things. They're asking to take a segmented 20,000 square foot piece of land and then taking that away, just subtracting 20,000 square feet from their current zoning, and then changing that zoning to what is surrounding RDA 20. So
mhm.
it's a two-step process. So there's no, they aren't. I just and maybe Dia, this is exactly what you're saying. I was just getting a little confused, so I want to make sure that I'm on the same page. They aren't adding more housing to the existing PRD. they're creating a new lot under a completely different zone.
But there's
Yes.
also the value of the negative space. Is some calculus of the PRD it hinged on a certain amount of open space that they promise to maintain within the PRD? Like, are they
Yeah.
selling off an important lot that they'll then go looking for adjacent to Sucker Brook, for example?
And that was
Yeah,
my
I'm-
concern, was this document that we have 2 pages of. I actually sent it to you, Taylor, but you probably don't have the rest of the document. I don't know what else it says in it. Does it talk about what the purpose of the open space is, how much there should be? What deal was made in order to make this all work? When I was a sophomore in high school, this was all happening. They made some deal somehow, and I feel like they just showed us the exit clause here, but they didn't
Right.
show us the rest of the deal. So without seeing the rest of that, it's hard to know how important, how integral this lot is to what was agreed on in 1988. So,
You know, I kind of had the same thought. I looked at it and I remember this development and the long approval process and intense discussion. And I looked at it, my thought was, this was a lot more than 2 pages. There was a lot that went into this. I never saw it, but it went on for a long time. It was not 2 pages. My thought was, was a commitment made specifically, that we'll develop this and no more, what they have. But I wondered, my impression of those negotiations were that there's very likely something like that is buried in all those pages that we didn't get. But I don't have it.
exactly, that's my question and concern.
And,
So yeah, we should be able to get that document from the building department. I mean, it's been a while ago, but somebody obviously has a copy of it because they found these 2 pages.
I wonder if it's at the registry.
Hmm.
Might be.
And there's always my concern, which is, we will move on, but our decisions will stand, for eternity. So if people look back and say, well, they eventually sold off parts of the PRD, why wouldn't they sell off parts of the MSMD or so we have to think if we're allowing an overlay district to be broken up and rezoned, we have to make sure that we,
Although, Carrie, I don't think this isn't an overlay district. This is just a zone.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I read it as an overlay, but I think I looked at too many things that day.
Well, it is, yeah, it's a PRD.
Okay.
It could have some
But-
shared characteristics with overlays, but it's its own zone.
Yeah.
So more like the MSND than the mod.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think, Taylor, that we are all, I think my understanding is that we kind of agree on the process they're going through. The question that everyone seems to raise is, we don't understand the importance of this parcel, whether it was slated to be developed or whether it was slated to be part of essentially the permanent open space requirement. And without that knowledge, I think we've got a lot of questions we need answered. So if we could get a hold of that original document to try to understand what constraints were put on the development. I'm not ready to, right now I have more questions than answers, and they make me feel like I don't want this to go forward without getting those answers.
So the board will need to vote on this in the 29th. Part of why it's here today is so that we have this discussion now. So what do we need for the 29th? You'll have a small little presentation from the either the petitioner or their legal, but what would you like to have before then?
So why does this have to be done on the 29th? Is because it has to occur during a public hearing?
That's correct. Yep. I mean, we
But-
could, and then that's really the last opportunity we have before town meeting, because public hearing, you need 2 weeks. You need to advertise it 2 weeks out. It's really the last opportunity we have before
But
town meeting.
So we're still 2 weeks out. I mean, town meeting doesn't begin until the 6th or the 7th.
The 7th.
right, so we still have time to schedule a public hearing right before town meeting, which is uncomfortable, but still possible.
So you're,
We have,
Hmm.
you mean between the 29th? Well, we don't, if the next time we visit this is the 29th. So are you, what, I think Taylor's asking what materials we need to feel ready to vote on the 29th at the public hearing. Uh, are you suggesting
I
we may need another one after that?
No, what I'm suggesting is that there, if we have to do it at a public hearing and we cannot get the documents by the 29th, there's still a possibility of having a public hearing on the 7th, right before town meeting.
Well, that
And
wouldn't
so
give.
I'm just, that would still give us, so all I'm saying is that it's not quite, the 29th is maybe the 11th hour and the 7th is the 11th hour and 59th minute, but it's, there's still a chance. So personally, I would like to see this entire, I guess it's the ZBA decision. I would like to see the entire decision in order to make my mind up.
I agree, and I have a question regarding the public hearing. If at that time we don't have enough information, can we continue it, or do we need to have scheduled the date that we're continuing to 2 weeks in advance?
you can continue it.
I think you would schedule 2 public hearings so that you have 2 weeks' notice, and then you would continue the agenda to the second public hearing.
Well,
That's not required, but that would be
no, yeah,
nice. That would be nice, but that's not
it would be
required.
nice, but yeah, once we open it, we don't have to
I
re-announce it.
think that you can let me, before I just throw something out in the ether, Brian, I'll look it up for you.
Okay, thank you.
But I'm happy to do it on the 29th if we have that document. I have no problem with that. It
You
just-
know, thinking about what the information we're looking for, it might be on the master deed. The survey, the master, it's going to call out everything within this development. And it may absolutely identify. It certainly, these deeds identify exclusive use areas and common areas and areas that are set aside for this or that special purpose, and defining exactly what you can and can't do with it. Whether this, what is this? Think about it. What is this now? Is it common space? Can any resident of this community, set up a tent or park their car on it? Probably, certainly not. It probably is spelled out there exactly what this is. But you would expect it to be. That's what those documents are for, to be very specific about what every part of the real estate is, who has rights to it, what their rights are, and what the association's rights are. It might be pretty easy, and that is at the registry, certainly. They didn't include it.
Right.
So I think both of those documents would be useful. Certainly, whichever one is easiest to get to first. But I would think that the proponents of this, if they seemingly have the decision from the ZBA at hand, so they could give us a full copy if we can't find it internally. But
Okay.
Yeah, maybe I look to you because you just might know the answer. What if the planning board doesn't vote? What if the planning board votes no? What happens?
the planning board has to review it, as far as I know. We don't have to actually approve. It's a citizen's petition, but I believe according to the our founding document in the MGL, we are required to review them, but we do not have to endorse or I don't know what all the exact details are. We haven't done this in so long that I've forgotten.
And I agree with that part, but since it's zoning, the planning board has the authority to control zoning. So,
Well, but the zoning, the ultimate control of zoning is town meeting, right?
well,
So
sure,
we
yeah,
can, yeah, so it's, we can weigh in. And I think what we're supposed to do is to review this to make so that, it has more eyes on it prior to town meeting. But it's really town meeting that is the final say on whether,
okay,
well, the AG is the final say, but it's town
right,
meeting that makes the local decision. So,
okay,
but I think it would be useful if we could just reach out to legal and say, you know, what is our role? I mean, the last time I think we did something like this was back uh when oh, for Pete's sake, it's the Oriental Carpet Place, Badakian. I wanted to say something, I want to say Kardashian, but it's not that. The Badakian. That's the last time I think that there was a citizens petition for zoning, and the planning board actually adopted that, I think. So I'm not
okay,
sure the last time we actually had a citizens petition just straight on its own, not within my tenure. So having legal give us some advice on what the heck is expected of us might be useful.
okay, thank you.
Okay, anything else on the ledges? We don't have it on the list, but it seems sort of timely with Dieb's institutional knowledge fresh in our minds to mention that there is a citizen petition that will be raised at town meeting that is suggesting that we institute term limits for, I think, just elected boards. So we should have a position on that because we are an elected board. And it's asking for a limit, I want to say 2 terms over 18 calendar years. So it'd be 6 years over 18 calendar years.
Oof,
Planning board.
that seems really strict. 6 terms over 18 years, or 6 years over 2 terms, which is 6 years over 18. Wow.
So what's your interpretation of that? If you counting you're on a board for 6 years.
So from, I think,
So you have
from
to,
election of your first term, you would then wait 18 years to run for a 3rd term. So you would,
Mhm.
yeah. Is
sit
that
out for,
Or
you'd sit
yeah,
out for 12 years?
Mhm.
That seems,
yeah,
it's kind of a long time.
It does
a
seem like a
long
long
time.
time.
I mean, you're sort of, the kind of knowledge and experience you had is sort of lost, really lost.
That's why I
And
thought
the
this
one-
was a good minute to bring it up after we sort of finished.
Right. I
Yes,
mean,
right.
So I'm I think that there's good reason to have term limits. Because often in this town, people are on elected boards and no one runs against them. And so you get the same people on the board for a very long time. It can happen. Planning board really hasn't had that too much. I mean, I think we've only had one person who's been on this board. That was Maureen Meister, who was on for some 19 to 20 years. I think that's really a 5 sigma, or sorry, that's out of the ordinary by far. Certainly there are people on the select board, I think, who, I don't know who's the longest person who's been on the board. I know Mike Betancourt's been on the board for a number, I don't know what his term is.
no, mm,
Yeah, but there's usually a fairly decent, reasonable turnover rate.
I think so. Yeah.
But, from my personal experience, I'd say 9 years is too long, and maybe 6 years isn't a bad term limit. 9 years is, I mean, I'd be up on for 9 years, so maybe 9 years is okay. I'm just looking back and seeing.
That was my thought, was two terms seem short, but term limits seem I mean, it's optimistic about the number of people in town who are willing to serve on town government. But it'd be nice if we, like, do we have empty seats if the people who are willing have spent their terms?
Yeah, and
I
I
mean,
don't,
that's my,
Short of
That's my
required
concern.
service, which would be awesome.
the last election for the planning board had two people running unopposed. The term before that, we actually had one person running for 2 seats unopposed. We had a write-in, and I believe the election before that, we had one run unopposed with a write-in. I
If we're
believe
going-
that, go ahead.
If we're going back to 2.5 years, when I was last up for election, there was, my seat was, challenged. No, that's not the word.
Competitive.
Whatever.
or- Yeah.
It was a competitive seat, but that's the first time I recall that in a long time.
I,
Yeah, I'm just worried that we have a hard time getting people in town to run for the planning board, clearly. And if we have someone who's running for instance, UDAB, after your second term, and you say, I want to run for the third term, we should hold on to you, that's a you of the future, with all our might, because we might end up not having anybody run. And we certainly better have people run than have nothing wrong with the people who've been write-in candidates. They've been some very good candidates, but it's not showing that we have a massive fight for people to get in.
Yeah, I think the one way, so this is something I don't know. I know that if someone leaves early, that there is a selective process where the planning board and the select board get together and they can appoint someone. So I don't know if that happens if it's open because someone has, maybe it's the same thing. Maybe it is, you've left the board, there's no one to take up the slot, so they're appointed by the select board. The problem with that is that they are essentially, there's an interview process, it's not decided by the voters. It's decided by,
right.
8 people or however, 9 people instead of, the town. And if a term limit forces us always into the point where you have multiple members of the board who have been appointed, and then what happens is then they come up for election the next time around, and everyone always votes for the people who are already on the board, because no one, I mean, it just seems like it's an easy way to get yourself appointed to the board, and then you get,
Right.
you get to ride out.
And there's no
Um,
limit on changing boards. So you could serve 18 consecutive years if you did 2 on school committee, 2 on planning board, 2 on select board.
I think sitting out for 12 years, twice as long as you served, I don't know, that's a
Mhm.
Yeah.
long, that's a long cooling off kind of.
Yeah, it does seem like a long
I'm not
time.
sure what it is you're trying, exactly what it is you're trying to regulate there, but that's like,
Yeah, maybe
That's
not. more
forever.
than
That's
That's a-
forever. You're not
consecutive.
coming back.
that's a long
Yeah.
time.
And I think maybe that's the point, is to essentially, the facts that you're in practice, it's you get to sit for X number of terms and that's it. Unless you decide to go in for one term, go out for another term, go in for another, so you take a break in between, but that's ridiculous.
Yeah, no, that doesn't seem productive.
Even that, though, wouldn't count because it says no more than 2 terms within 18 calendar years. So if you did a term and then took 3 years off and then did another term, that 18 years starts from the previous
First term.
First
first
election.
term, yeah.
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 So then you
Oh, wait, no, well, yeah, but is it a rolling window?
It must be a rolling window, but you couldn't, if you served a term and then took 3 years
Yeah.
off and then served another term, you could not then serve another term because that would be a total of 9 years within serving
12
within 12 years.
Yeah, you wouldn't have to wait a full 12 years. You'd only have to wait another however. But yeah, I think the second part is too extreme. The 2 terms within 18 years is too extreme. I think that, or too rigid.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, citizen petitions kind of struggle sometimes here, so I don't know how it will do, but I thought we should mention it because we are an
I
elected
think
board.
We
we
will
are
have
an
to have an
elected
opinion.
board,
Well,
so
it pertains to us, we will have to have an opinion because we will be asked.
yeah. So my concerns about this board are that it often takes a long time to come up to speed because a lot of stuff you only learn about when it comes before the board, and it may be several years in between those special occasions. And so you don't really get to see everything until you've been on the board for 3, 4, or 5 years. However, we have a much better staffed planning department. So that makes up for, and there will be more, corporate knowledge there. So that makes up for that to some extent. But we don't really have an educational onboarding of planning board members, which at some point might be nice. But the other flip side is we could take this as an I'm sorry, I'm getting away from what you're suggesting, Brian, which is to come to a decision as to whether we support this. But I'm thinking we could take this as an opportunity to start doing outreach to the community to get them to think about running for planning board.
I think we do
But
that on a person-to-person basis, and even our most active members are hard to move.
yeah, but one of the problems I have with the person-to-person basis is that we essentially create this sort of, this little clique, as it were, because we're 5 people who have a set of friends or a set of acquaintances. Perhaps they overlap, but even then, it's not like there are a lot of people in town who aren't within our circles who might be good. And so reaching out on to say, hey, I know you, you're great, you should run for the board, I think really limits the people, the pool of people.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I talk to the people I know about running for the board, they look at me and they say, why the hell would I want to spend all of those evenings?
Right. That's fair. It is sort of a self-limiting.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
I would move that we, for all of the reasons we've discussed this evening, that it's difficult in a town when we have so many open, um, challenged seats, where if a seat is left empty, it is really comes down to an appointment by the planning board and the select board. And the fact that serving 2 terms out of 18 years really is, it really essentially is a lifetime ban from the position. I would move that we vote to not endorse. We recommend the town meeting not endorse this article.
Second,
Okay. Is there further discussion on the topic? Okay, roll call vote. Nick,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Dieb,
Aye.
Brian,
aye.
and I'm an I as well. So we unanimously do not support term limits. Or I think it does have an article number, and it is. Well,
It's
it's a
currently
draft.
Article 22,
It's a
but that
draft,
could
so we
change.
don't know. Yeah, so
We
it's,
don't,
we
we
know
don't
which-
support this. It's not that we don't support term limits, perhaps, but
right. Yeah.
this,
We don't support
as
this
written.
particular article.
right,
Yeah.
this approach.
I got it. Great. Brian, do we want, so we sort of ended up on maybe, I think everything else is probably short enough to bring up later. Do you think?
As far as the different the different warrant articles,
Yes.
yeah, I mean, I'm not, the ones that I talked to you about, Carrie, I'm not even sure we want to vote on them, but there's certainly ones that we could talk about later though.
Okay, we do assemble before town meeting, so we have a little time before the beginning of town meeting, and we have time after the public hearing on the 29th, so we can revisit them. Okay, so if we move on to North Main, so it's, it's submitted, so the only thing that we still have as sort of like leftover decisions to be made for North Main that is not held to the town meeting timeline, but is something that we had promised to visit before then, are the design guidelines. And I was spending a lot of time putting together a chart where I took the suggestions that were thoughtfully created by Maura Sullivan, and I was comparing them to what we had in our draft, and trying to close the gaps. And I was finding myself, Googling the difference between dormers and, trying to figure out the materials pieces. And I realized I am potentially the least qualified person to lead the design guidelines chat. I think our officially the liaison for the 3A guidelines, which should come out of the North Main guidelines, is Nick. And I think John's expertise is valuable here. And ultimately, I think we should do it. I think we promised to do it. I think they're important.
Mhm.
I would have spent many hours and had put several into it before I realized I'm not the right person for this job. So we have some time this evening if we want. Nick, if you have priority items for the design guidelines that you think we should discuss that would help us craft this document that will live outside the bylaw but be an essential companion to it, I will hand over the mic to you now, and you can sort of lead us through some of that discussion. But I will gratefully take your leadership here.
Yeah, no, I don't know that I can say, well, let's add this or that or the other thing. What I could do is just look at the document and see what we need to do to take it to the next step.
When you think about the sort of gully between what was proposed, that we incorporated several parts of Moore's language into the bylaw, and we kept a bunch of it in the architectural design section that's officially outside the bylaw now. Are there pieces of it that you think, dormers, materials, doorways, balconies? What do you think are the things?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a while since I've really taken an in-depth look at it. I know that those are some of the things we wanted to talk about. I also know that we did talk about it, and there was some pushback on some of the items until we decided to separate out that process and have it be its own document. So I don't know that I can make a case. I wasn't prepared to kind of make a case tonight on adding certain things. Where is it in process at this point? I mean, we've had a process where we've gotten some drafts and looked at them and taken some stuff out and put some stuff in. And so I'm imagining that there is somewhere a draft of the design standards, I guess is what we'd call them.
Do you?
And
I'm gonna drop it in a chat to you right now. I'm gonna text.
okay.
We-
All right.
we
Why
don't
don't you
have-
actually email it to me, because I don't know if I can.
Email it to your Outlook.
To my Winchester.
Yeah, we can't chat on Zoom here.
That is a link to the architectural design. You can't.
So we got when we received Maura Sullivan's detailed standards, some of us submitted comments on that. So while those were, I believe she meant them for North Main Street. Right now, I can't recall if they were North Main Street or for the
North
for the
Main.
mob.
You're right.
But I think that at the very least, all of us hopefully have had a chance to give our comments on that. Now, I don't know how we deal with that in the
There
sense
it is.
that I think that like I found some sections I thought were too detailed, so I removed them. So if someone thought that they were okay, you can't combine those two edits because someone didn't edit them. And I think that moving forward, maybe we need to look at a document which takes everyone's comments and doesn't actually delete sections, but combines all of the comments into one document. And we might be able to use that. We had some design standards from Michael, and he had sort of like a one-page thing with, long lists of things. And if we could, Taylor, is Michael going to be helping with us with this? Is that part of our contract with him?
Yeah, he'll be, the final document is going to be coming from Michael. So yeah, we still have him throughout the rest of the time. I think just to, at this point we need to provide him, or at least say this is the language that we're going to use. We can certainly ask for some minute detail suggestions, but really what Michael was waiting for is for us to say like, okay, this is the language, and then he's going to put it together.
So
So-
these, oh, go ahead.
So what I was thinking is that we have that we do have a set of design approaches from Michael, which are, I think, maybe from a 10,000 foot over, view of them. They're a little more general, but they provide sort of like, here's the philosophy of how we do things. And maybe they're a little more detailed than I recall.
Is this what you sent me, Kerry? This 21-page document? Is this just what you sent me? Is just the design standards?
Yeah, is it titled Architectural Standards?
Regulations governing the development and architectural design of section 8.12 of the Winchester zoning bylaw.
Just say 21
Section-
pages.
21 pages. So I'm wondering if this is more than.
No, this
or-
is, it was long. I mean, we went
Okay,
from.
this is it.
10-page
Okay, and this is
articles
what,
to 20-page
this
articles.
looks like what Michael put together.
Taylor can correct me where I'm wrong here, but I believe comments from Maura's document have been incorporated to some extent. I actually don't know where we are in terms of the incorporation of comments on her document and on Michael's document. Taylor, do you know if we look at the one that you shared with me, which is dated 9/16/24, where we are for comment incorporation here?
Yeah, we've had one round of everyone's comments go through this.
Okay, so they're incorporated. You feel like this
Yes.
is a balanced sort of, yeah. It's a lot more detailed than what Michael had originally proposed, which is why he should not be at these meetings, but of course he's valuable for finding the.
Could we get that circulated to the board?
Yeah, here.
Just because that sounds like it's a combination of two documents that I don't
Well,
know.
Diab, it's kind of, it's not exactly what you were just looking for. It is a combination of people's comments, but what it isn't is a combination of the comments that we had on the comments.
Okay.
Well, I'm just,
it's a single document that
yeah,
it's 21 pages long.
I am coming up with all sorts of ideas of what this thing looks like, which are they're all rooted in dreams and nightmares. So why don't we, seeing it, I think would be useful.
Everyone should have it now. Nick, I'm sorry, I sent it to you twice. I just sent it to the board.
That's fine. Yeah, no, that's
yeah.
fine. But this
Okay, so
can be
what it's worth, some of
downloaded, I guess.
some of the pages are diagrams. So measuring building height is a full page. Frontage build out strategies is a full page. Some of it is
So I would I'm not, personally, I'm not sure that it's we're going to have a very substantive discussion about this evening. And I'm wondering, while I recognize that we want to have something by town meeting, maybe we can set aside an hour and I don't know what the schedule is for our next meeting, but
Our next meeting will be after the public hearing. And we
So
don't,
it's-
we don't have
29th,
much, because
yeah.
our you know, our articles are done. The public hearing will review what we heard for comments. I don't think there's a ton we can do to amend. And we won't have any petitions yet, so we have time after that one.
So maybe we just, we go through this with a fine tooth comb and we are prepared to, and we submit our comments to Taylor so that he can combine them into a document. Let's say that we say by Monday next, we get our comments to Taylor on this document. He can combine them and then send them out to the board for our review.
I didn't think
then
that this was that tight of a deadline.
Well, we had talked about, so if this is the document from which flows our multifamily overlay district design guidelines, which we had wanted to get to town meeting. So that's
Right, but we don't need to do that now. We don't need to get it to town meeting. We have some time to kind
well,
of.
we have time, but we had discussed having something available. One of the things was the unknown what were the design guidelines going to be for the mod. And we had told town meeting that we would have something, just, they don't have to vote on it, but we wanted to get them a picture of where we were going with it by town meeting. So if this, I would suggest that if we want to at least try to have something for town meeting to know that, so they know which direction we're going,
Yes.
then maybe, yeah, that's the only reason Nick, I'm suggesting we look at this soon. If we're okay with not presenting anything to town meeting, then we can take longer. It's just, do we just give a sort of an update on where we are? Is that a sufficient placeholder for town meeting?
It does feel a little bit rushed. I mean, I don't know if it's a sufficient placeholder. But I think maybe an update might be sufficient.
The passing of 3A in the spring was really contingent on us making sure that design guidelines were in place when developers were going to be able to use 3A. And 3A is
Okay.
pretty close to state approval. I think we have some things that we're answering to wrap that up, but I really don't
Right.
want it hanging until Springtown meeting.
Right,
It's not
right.
that they have to, it's not that they have to vote on it, it's ours to vote on. But I really
Right.
don't like not delivering on something that was promised as part of a selling point for passage of a major bylaw.
Mm-hmm. I mean, in theory, this could go the way it is. In theory, right?
Well,
There
I
are
have,
some, go ahead, please.
I mean, in theory it could, and in theory it couldn't, depending. I mean, I don't recall all the details, so I'm not sure where, I don't know where I stand on these.
Right.
I mean, in my mind, the real time crunch is that if we intend to use this as the template for the 3A district, then that's a two-step process, right? So we do North Main Street first, and then we do 3A. So we will not, I don't think in the next 3 weeks, we're going to be able to provide town meeting the mod design guidelines. I think we
Yeah.
might be able to say, here's where we're going with North Main Street, and we are going to use these as the framework, and we will have this done by the end of January, and then we are going to vote on it at the end of January.
Yeah.
That seems fair.
Even if we
'Cause
felt amazing about it, I wouldn't want us to vote until we start, I mean, we would present where we are to town meeting and get some feedback. I mean, it's a work in progress, but I don't want to go and say, we're thinking about it. I want to go and say, this is pretty close to where we are.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah,
right
and
now we have a big gulf between the two ideas. I think the architectural design document that I shared, I think is the start of a good merger, but there are still, the materials piece, for example, we have a lot to cover there. There's a suggestion in Moore's document that we really list specific materials, brick and, authentic stone and, asphalt shingles and those things. And there's the question of whether or not we want to make sure that we're responding to materials innovation, which is accelerating all the time, and responding to climate sustainability questions. So do we want to leave the word genuine in as we have it, or do we want to say it should visually reference genuine materials and list those? I mean, we have a lot of sort of like those nuanced decisions to make.
yeah,
Eh,
I think those are going to be critical in terms of providing the flexibility that the future will require. So I think if we go to town meeting with a reasonable, if we're at the 80% completion on North Main Street, I mean, I think that would be what we could do. Just practically, we've only got 3 weeks.
One of the things I was going to add was we've talked a lot about how 3A will flow from North Main Street document, but the requirements on the 3A design guidelines are very different than the requirements on, well, they are different in that 3A must be much more objective than North Main has to be. So it's possible that we don't, I'm throwing this out there, that we don't want to list particular materials for North Main. It's possible. But then when we say, well, now we're going to filter that down to 3A, we can't just say in the 3A document it has to look good, which, because we can't do that. So therefore, there we do need the materials. So then it comes back to that we might need to include the materials in North Main Street, even if we're not anxious to do that because we want it to flow down to 3A.
So which one is going to be longer? The 3A is going to be longer because, I mean, North Main is going to be longer because 3A is more restrictive?
I think it depends on what we write.
And I think we have to be careful about and go back to the state's sample in terms of its design guidelines. They are, I no longer recall the details about whether we can actually specify types of materials. I don't remember anymore, but there were restrictions on specificity. So, and it wasn't, I don't think it was simply, you couldn't say, use high quality materials. I think there was more. I think it would be useful to revisit those the proposed guidelines that they had to try to understand what is possible in the 3A guidelines. I no longer recall what they are. But we do want, I would hope that there would be not too many differences between the two
Yes.
in terms of the overall approach to the quality of design. Some of the general need for articulation, maybe you have different types of articulation based on whether you're closer to downtown or not. But I think in my mind, what makes design guidelines effective, in my vast ignorance of such things, is you provide the conceptual framework of what is expected, and that it can take different forms, but still will end up with a nice result.
Right. And I think I agree with you. I think if we can get design guidelines that satisfy what I think the state is trying to say, which is it can't be so specific or so cost prohibitive that it blocks development because the design standards are so cumbersome. I think if we apply that, I think if we can use the level of specificity that would make the town feel like we were producing a product that kept a cohesive feel from the center business district to the border, and in that specificity allowed enough sort of, you know, cost flexibility and design flexibility to make the projects feasible, we should ideally have the same design guidelines for both. That would be great. It's just getting there.
And I agree with that. My point was not that I wouldn't like to see that. My point was we have different constraints on the two sets of guidelines, and if we can merge those constraints and make essentially one set of documents, but one set of design guidelines, but two documents, that would be ideal. But we just want to make sure that if we have something that's not fully objective, which I recall being the standard sort of has to be objective. So we couldn't just say it looks nice, which no one here is thinking that, but in the North Main Street, we technically, I suppose, could say it just has to look nice. Obviously, I don't mean that, but for 3A, we absolutely can't say that. It has to be objective, and because looks nice is not objective. So as long as got something that covers both, then that would be great. I agree.
So one approach might be to start with a set of guidelines, which is, you know, it's a kitchen sink, but it's a structured kitchen sink. And then we start to filter out the things and see whether or not we can accomplish the same goal with less specific language, and therefore come up with a set of guidelines which works for both. It's easier to take stuff out than to put stuff in, and if we may discover that there's an underlying current that we can use to combine certain sections, or there's a way of approaching it which would work. So, you know, I think we start with something which is more detailed than we know we're going to, then will come out at the end, but we use that to try to make something I'm not very coherent this evening, but that's
Yeah.
where I'm going from.
So the specific architectural, so some things that are included in the architectural design standards that moved out into this section instead of staying in the bylaw include, you know, the street trees, the parking design, the bike parking, all of those things are moved over here. So some of that I think we already felt good about. The parts that we're going to have to spend time either becoming educated about or have someone with more knowledge, and I'm hoping Nick and John are the folks that want to step up and do this, because I think this is closer to a native language for them, or, you know, gables and dormers and balconies. And I don't know if from the state's perspective, if requiring a 1 foot from the top of the roof line is restrictive, or is that freeing? Is it sort of like, great, now I know what to tell my architect, or is that impossible because it changes something, you know?
You know, when I hear this, when I think about it from the standpoint of trying to propose a development, you know, the specificity about, yes, where you want the dormer to intersect the ridge. You know, I look at it and I think when I read something like that, I say, good to know. You know, as opposed to
helpful.
finding
That's
out
great.
when you show up at the meeting, you know, I'm not sure I like that. You know, sometimes I think I like that better when it intersects the ridge, you know, I don't know, not at the ridge, but somewhere else, you know, so that's good. That is generally good, because now we have the rules and we write them down and we try to make sure we comply with them, or we can explain our argument for how we read that rule and we came up with this design, and maybe something can be worked out. The issue about materials is honestly is controversial. You know, some materials that, you know, sometimes the words used are traditional or authentic or genuine. You know, they have sometimes they're cost issues, and sometimes they're issues just about around sustainability. You know, some, you know, woods that need to be painted frequently, I've always myself thought about the environmental impact of what the materials you use to remove the paint, not good. And now all that paint's kind of in the air. I know it's not lead, but I've always, I don't know. Very controversial.
Yeah, I mean, materials evolve as well.
And they certainly will evolve. I mean, things we haven't thought of yet are going to become available.
I mean, some of the synthetic planking, I mean, looks an awful lot like the real thing.
Oh, I'm familiar with a project in Charlestown. It went through a tremendous amount of review. You can actually see this building from the highway from 93. And it looked exactly like the drawing when it was completed. It looked great. And it turned out the developer used PVC instead of wood for all the trim work. And it was a elaborate trim design. And they made him remove it because it was supposed to be wood. I thought this was incredibly wasteful.
Oh, wow.
And
Yeah.
not good for the environment at all.
Yeah.
What was up there was going to last forever. And you couldn't tell standing on the street it looked beautiful. I thought this was terrible, but this spec was wood, this cost, by the way, it cost a fortune to do it in PVC. That stuff is not cheap. Wood is cheap.
Right.
Anyway, that was, I thought that was crazy. But it's been done. It's, anyway, it is controversial.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, I bet, yeah. I mean, just from a sustainability standpoint, I mean, maintenance,
I've
Yeah.
got to come in and say, unfortunately, PVC is one of the dirtiest plastics to create.
Yeah.
So while to the homeowner, to the end user, I mean, I have an old house and I've had, boards replaced because they were rotted out and in bad places. And I was always, trying to get my contractors to stop using their chop saws with the PVC without gathering all of the PVC flecks that floated to the ground. But also when you look at the environmental costs of producing it, it's a pretty nasty chemical.
no, yeah.
So there's all sorts of considerations that go into sustainability. So I would say, yeah, tying it to a particular material is difficult. And I know that we've had discussions on previous projects on this board where we've probed, can you use this type of material? It seems to be greener than the other. And they were like, yeah, we're evaluating it on, we sort of have these we tried it to see what would happen over time. And we discovered that it didn't work out. There's this, we just, I think, have to put language in which steers people in the direction we wish them to go in terms of sustainability, overall life cycle of sustainability, and just leave it at that. I mean, it's
it's controversial. You talk about the dust on the ground. I've often talked about, the dust you're breathing in, whether it's pressure treated lumber or hardy plank, that's cement. None of it's good. It's there's the sawdust, but
I'm going to get my
Yeah.
N95 mask and wear it everywhere now, John. Thanks.
Anyway, you'll get into no, it's very, there are good arguments to be made all over the place on it. That's I would acknowledge that.
At the risk of belaboring a conversation, we just got our house painted, and all the rotten wood, where they could, they used PVC. And I would defy anybody to look at our house and say where the PVC trim is and where the wood trim is. In fact, I can hardly tell. But so the question is, are we looking at from a, I mean, that's a good question that you guys have brought up. I mean, as far as sustainability of the material and how dirty it is produced and cut. I mean, that goes down a big rabbit hole if we start going down that direction when we're talking about design, guidelines, if we're talking about how clean it is to cut it on site. I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't think about it, but that's way above my pay grade to understand all of that. I don't know.
You'll be able to pick out the PVC from the wood in 10 years.
Because the wood will keep on rotting and the PVC won't.
The paint will blow off it. It'll start to, yeah, it'll be easier. Down the road, it's going to be easier to pick this out.
And I'll
Well,
have to
only
paint
if
it
you
again
use-
in 10 years.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I want to point out in terms of materials is that, there are a lot of older homes, 100 years or so old, where, you look at the corner of the house and it's using wood to make the appearance of stacked granite.
Coins, those are called coins.
Yeah. And originally they were all made of stone, but you can't afford to do it all in stone. So they replaced it with another material to give the same aspect of it. So, over time, we're going to come up with different ways of doing different looks, and it's just going to flow. And, if you go, you go to Europe and they use plaster to make things look like everything everywhere. I mean, they just do wonderful things with plaster on the exteriors of buildings. You would swear they're all,
Yep.
chunks of stone. So it's the look we want to go for. I think it's the level of, it's the quality of the look we want to go for rather than the actual materials. And I think that's what's probably going to be the most difficult part, is trying to figure out how do we create that vision, which is specific enough so that, as you pointed out, John, a developer can look at it and say, yeah, I know what I can do. But
Yeah.
also, not so specific that it prevents innovation in terms of materials or how people start using things differently. So, but that's where I hope Michael Wang can help us in terms of, pointing out areas where we could consolidate, or we haven't, paid attention to how things are going, since he has a great overview of how people are doing it around our area.
But it's also worth pointing out that Michael's pretty strongly prefers to leave a lot of it up to the project. So I think he was favoring fairly vague guidelines. So if we're going to ask him to be this specific, we need to be clear about what we're prioritizing, because I think to him it's like, you're parsing some really random stuff here.
Yeah, no, I agree. I was just thinking he would be able to point out to us that, this don't make no sense, or, you can do the same thing in a different way, which is perhaps better. So.
Right. Yeah.
But,
Yeah. I am trying to find, so we have comments. So I have a meeting with the permanent street tree committee people, so I'll bring up the street tree part, the open space part. I'll sort of ask for feedback on those sections of the architectural design parts. We can all comment on how the parking section's looking. There's quite a bit of this that I think we all sort of can visualize pretty easily. And I will ask that maybe John and Nick get together and we're all welcome to comment on it, but I would appreciate some help prioritizing certain sections of this. I'm trying to find, we have the SharePoint section on comments from the public that contains Maura Sullivan's document. She made her initial comments when it was incorporated into the document. So it's like a 40+ page document with her comments worked in on the entire bylaw. So it's a bit cumbersome. But somewhere between that and what we have currently in the architectural design draft, we can all make comments, but I think if we can be led through certain sections here, some of which we've touched on, some of which we're just going to get to some midpoint. I mean, materials, we're going to hash out some middle ground that we're ultimately going to be a little proud of and a little regretful of. It's just the way materials are going to go. It's an evolving field. It's a sensitive subject, but things like, where the balcony, how the balconies are configured, the bay window alignment, those sorts of things, architectural details, besides materials, the other thing, you know, your comment about knowing exactly how to set up the dormers is helpful. If you can take out pieces of that, yes, this makes it easier as a developer. This is not going to give us the result that we want and lead us through it at the next meeting. That would be incredibly helpful. However you want to do it. Just find points of conflict between what was proposed and what we have written, and highlight, just bring our attention to anything that we may not know to comment on. That would be awesome. And roof types, that's another one where I sort of feel like I don't know what I don't know. Is there any other section that folks have read over where they thought, I don't know what's happening here?
I had to Google roof types because honestly, I'm not sure I know the difference between the different kind, different kind of dormers and different kind of roofs. So I had to look up some of this stuff to make sure I understood it. So that's why it makes sense for someone
Yeah.
with more of a design or engineering, well, that kind of engineering background on those.
Yeah, Nick, your thoughts on which, not here, but at the next meeting, your thoughts on sort of which design styles would sort of best create the look we're looking for, which ones we could probably take or, and then I feel like if you and John can come to a point of agreement, we've probably taken the two halves of town and made them pretty happy.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I don't know. Do you have the comments that Maura had made?
Yeah, so again, they're kind of mashed. I'm going to send out the link to the SharePoint, which Taylor sent me. And it's not, I thought there was a version that was a little better streamlined, but here is
Well, there was a version that was just, I thought, design guidelines
I know, and
that we got as a separate document from Maura. Because I remember marking that up.
right. That's what I'm remembering. And I think I'm just not good at listening and scouring. So I'm linking you to the SharePoint. And we
Okay.
may just need to dig it up on our own.
Or we could ask Maura, who appears
could
to
ask
be
Maura,
in our.
yes. To do just a little bit more work for our board, which I'm sure she's like.
So the thing I'm actually I would like it if we could set some dates when inputs from the board are accepted, so that John and Nick have a chance to look at where our comments, and then they can digest them and review them, and then get their. I'm trying to figure out when the board
Maybe we
has to
comment by
provide input.
Monday and they present on the 29th. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, but it would be nice having, if they could have their stuff done earlier than the 29th, so we could have it a couple days early, just so we can,
Okay,
if we wouldn't get, like the cold open on it.
right. Right. I thought
But that may not be possible, so.
if we have our comments to you fine folks by the 21st, that would give you a week and a day. That would give you, and then you got them back to us by, let's call it the end of the weekend before the 29th, and then we have
So
28th too short to, I don't know.
I actually am going to be in New York City next week. Not so available, but I'm pretty available this week. There is, I know we're sort of past the discussion part, but there is one thing that always rolls to my mind when we talk about the design standards and where that dormer meets the roof at the ridge, or some distance below the roof. There's the aesthetic issue. What always rolls to my mind is the efficiency issue. It's no question. It's more, you're getting more efficiency. People are getting more space to live if you attach it at the ridge. So many times I'm always annoyed when people think it's just builders being cheap. They have all their moves to be cheap, but there's also just an efficiency thing. I always think about, went through all this effort, and sometimes we did these things, and we've really reduced the utility of this thing that, you know, we've put a lot of time and we've into building, and you know, the environmental impact of it all, and you know, we can get a lot out of it because we were serving some other masters. Some and the real trick of architects is to come up with something that is pleasing to people and is actually very efficient, and you know, gives you the most living space given the footprint you started with. So that's my 2 cents worth on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think attaching a gable at the ridge is also more aesthetically.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
you know, it depends on the size of it.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot, but it's also a little harder to weatherproof, and you know, if I got to tell you, if you're building it, you don't give a crap. Whatever.
Right.
It just doesn't make any difference. You know, it's so granular. Like, really,
All right.
start counting
I think
nails.
I mean, I think we have this 21-page document, which sort of is the basis for what we're going to look at. I think that kind of simplifies things a little bit. And then I guess getting comments on that. I maybe I'm wondering if it'd be helpful to maybe discuss with Maura what some of her comments were. So I could maybe try to do that, and then circle back with John.
Yeah, we could do that
I mean, it doesn't have to take a long.
before Sunday. That would be. I leave Sunday.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you both. We'll get comments in by Saturday. Is that feasible, Brian, Dieb, me? Maybe.
Yes.
Great. Okay, perfect. Thank you. There is one other North Main item that I just remembered that I should bring up, which is that the Historic Commission raised the point that the Verizon building was not built until the 1950s, so it's outside of the time frame that would qualify it for a demolition delay, but it is architecturally I don't know if it's architecturally particularly important, but it housed a major shift in telecommunications, in that it went from, hold on, I'm looking for the email about this. Anyway, there was a question about whether or not it could come back onto the, it's not currently on our list of historic properties for Main Street because it's outside the time window. But it is, the date of its construction was 1957, but we believe it is significant in what it represented at the time. The late 1950s was a time when AT&T was upgrading the national phone system to electronic switching, along with the advent of area codes. This enabled people to dial long distance without operator assistance, a major breakthrough for its time. So it sort of opens the question of whether we want to, we would have to amend the article to include it because I think it currently does not have it included. He makes the point that we would hate to lose it. At the same time, I could envision its ultimate conversion into an apartment building, office complex, or some combo. Should that come to pass, we hope the integrity would be retained. So I'm just inviting thoughts on that before I respond to Jack and bringing into the sort of public record that there are questions from the Historical Commission about the value of that building, although it's outside the sort of preservation time frame.
So if I'm understanding correctly, the historical nature that they want to preserve of this building is actually the use, not the structure. But we would not require them presumably to keep switchboards if they even still exist in this building. I actually have a picture of it. Can I share the image of it?
Yeah.
Share. Is that showing up now?
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay, so I'm a little torn and confused because since I don't know that we actually can require the use to stay the same, and no one is claiming that the building, the nature of the building otherwise is historic. So,
I'd love to know what they're using it for now. Because,
Are they using it now?
oh, no, they
Yeah.
use it, but the switching, you know, they haven't used that technology in,
Right,
you
They're
know,
using,
50 years.
yeah,
right.
but they
Yeah.
still need to have data centers they switch at. So this
But I
in
wonder
my
what it, you know,
mind,
I'd like to take a tour. Like, what is, you drive by and you see old cabinetry, that the kind of
Yeah.
cabinetry that they had those switches in. I always wonder what goes on in there now, because
Right.
they sold the copper years ago for all those relays and things.
yeah.
I
So
was wondering.
oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Dan.
So I think we need to remember that historical does not just relate to architecture. Historical is any part of history which is important. And so I think recognizing the use of this building, whether it's being used that way now or not, it is it is an important part of our history. And so I think we should broaden our concept of what's important to keep in terms past just architecture. So I think that it would make sense for us to consider this historical. And while it would not be subject to the demo delay bylaw, it would certainly be something that we would indicate to developers that we want it to be carefully thought through what they're going to do with this site.
Yeah, it's
And-
a,
Can I just point out this? I don't want to keep anyone from making the decision that they were originally going to make, but this request came in after the motion was submitted. We can't amend the motion at this time. So if we want to add this, it has to be done on the floor.
Mhm.
I don't think this would be a big reach for town meeting. I would hope it would be one of the less controversial parts. So
Sort of mechanically, since it's not subject to a demo delay, does it just put, like, mechanically, what does it change? Does it put a memo in with the, 6 planning boards from now, someone finally takes action on the Verizon building? How do they, it's not, the historic commission checks it. It's not subject to a demolition delay. Does it have a memo attached to it that cites the old use, or what's?
well, don't we have language? We have language in the bylaw which talks about how we want people to develop historic structures, right?
Adaptive
I don't-
reuse.
Adaptive reuse. And so this would be, I don't have the language in front of me, unfortunately, and I don't recall what it says, but I think there's at least a hint that if it has been recognized in that list of buildings that we want it handled specially, right? So
Mhm.
again, even all the other buildings that are built before 45 and go through the demo delay, again, they wait a year out and they can demo it, but we still say when you're looking at one of these buildings, we want you to do something special. And so I don't remember what the language was, but I believe we have language in there saying that, something to that accord, or so that.
It just requires any structure that is, or any lot that has a structure that's in that table, requires it to go through the historical review process, which allows historical to have, say their opinion to the planning board at that time of what can or should happen. The planning board's still the ultimate permit granting authority, but the historical has the authority to say, this is particularly important. You have to reuse it as X, Y, Z. And it's up to the planning board to decide if they want to follow that or not.
That's the tricky part, is we would not be expecting a developer to reuse it for a telecommunications purpose. And I don't think it's way outside our jurisdiction to say, you're turning it into condos, which is fine, but we would love it if you had a museum section in the front that was a tribute to the old switchboards. I mean, I don't know if we,
We can't say what goes, I think that would be way beyond our purview, and I don't
that's
think
what I
that.
mean.
Yeah,
Yeah, but we're not asking for the use to be retained. We're
Right.
asking that the building is a symbol of the history of the spot. So that's why we can go in and go to an old mill building
I know, but
and renovate the mill building, but it still celebrates. We know that this is a mill building and it has the history of all of the things that went on into the building. And so the building itself is still a representative of that history. So you can still walk. So it's
but the
you've got a
mill building
Lowell.
had to have high ceilings. It had to have huge windows. It had to have certain features that created, it's positioned on a river. It has a big wheel outside. There are pieces of the building that contributed to the use that are unique, and that's why they drive preservation. If we start preserving buildings that has uses that we can't memorialize, is it just a building at an odd angle to what we're trying to accomplish for the street? I'm just asking questions. I'm not saying I disagree with the value of the Verizon building. I'm just saying it's tricky when you're truly memorializing a use within a building that had like almost nothing to do with the use.
But there are a number of, so one of the, I don't know about this particular, so this is a switching building. There are certainly substations, power substations, where the interior of the building is really spectacular because you have these 40, 50-foot high ceilings and it's just one enormous space.
Right.
And they are very successfully turned into rock climbing in gyms because you have these really tall walls.
Right. But is
But
this
but again, so that's a use that has nothing to do with the original use, but the building itself is still there.
I know, but the
So
building itself in that situation was integral to its purpose. Whereas I think you could take the switching station and fit it in a bunch of buildings.
yeah, but the building itself shows the use. I mean, I guess what I'm saying
Yeah, I see what
is
you're saying.
that you're recording history. If we just tear the building down, the history's gone. Right? It's like all you're going to do is put up a little signpost in front of the building and say, there used to be this cool brick building here, which was, this indication of this switch in technologies, and now it's gone. And so you can use the building itself as a symbol of that. And in a sense, it doesn't matter what the use is after it. It's just the existence of that building. So you walk down the street and you say, hey, yeah, there's this old building. What is it from?
But do we
You know,
save every building in Genetown because we sequenced the genome there and this drug innovation was there, even though
that's what history is. I mean, I understand
at some point. Yeah.
it's obviously every decision is unique, but some and
But, you know, but yeah, we do that. I know that the building in New York City where the standards for color television they were created by RCA, is memorialized.
I
You
mean, we
know,
save writers' homes. Like I understand it. I'm just saying,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of a case by case thing, and I don't know. I guess
mean,
it's worth discussion.
yeah,
anyway.
I mean, one of the things that we could look at is, look at the, look at the National Park Service's rules on what they consider historic buildings. They're fairly broad because they're looking at history across it. And so even though you don't, for instance, the Polaroid building on Memorial Drive, I mean, okay, it has some architectural things, but it's an important building because it was the Polaroid building. And now I don't know what it's used for. It's corporate offices of some sort. It doesn't really matter what's inside there, but you know where this building was there because of that real
Edwin Land.
that yeah,
Yeah.
it was innovation at an enormous scale. I mean, that's why it's kind of sad when you look at like the old Bell Labs properties and how they're just, there was just an amazing concentration of technology and innovation, and that building is representative of that era.
Yeah.
And so one of I'm trying to think back when we actually look back. I forgot what it was doing, but if we're looking at the National Park Service, and when you go through the getting the designation as being on the register has a fairly broad concept of what's important. And so when you look at it, you say, would this building be appropriate to go on the National Register? Maybe that's how you think about it, not in terms of its use now or what's useful be in the future, but is it worth preserving because of its symbol, it's what it symbolizes.
Right. No, I'm with you. I'm just making sure we
Yeah.
want.
Yeah, no, you're very good questions.
And again, like we preserve artists' homes and writers' homes, and they could have written it on a bus. So I understand the complicated relationship with buildings. But I'm just making sure we are willing to amend on the floor of town meeting inclusion of the Verizon building.
I'm not convinced that there's a rationale for amending on floor of town meeting for a building, for this building. I'm not sure that the use is so historic. I'm not sure that the building is so historic such that, and my concern is actually this. It's a fine building. It doesn't necessarily match our design guidelines. If you look at the number of anything we've sort of put out as far as the number of windows in the front, as far as the streetscape.
No way it matches.
No, it's at a
Pardon?
weird angle. It closes the sidewalk. Yeah, no way.
So the question is, by doing this, a future planning board will give some credit to somebody who wants to use this building in some way that goes against what the North Main Street guidelines are. And they will be in the right because they'll say it's a historic building and we're supposed to get some basically special treatment if we find a way to keep on using this historic building. So I think we have to be really careful. It's historic use of the building, maybe. I mean, I'm not even convinced that it's a particularly historic use of the building, but I'm just really uncomfortable. I think it's a slippery slope for me to vote yes on that.
I could tell you that in terms of the historic nature of that building, my father, for 60 years worked as an engineer in communications, mostly satellite communications for a defense contractor. But he used to talk about that building. And, from the 70s on, he used to talk about how we'd always drive by. I remember we once drove at night, you could look in and you could see the racks. And we always say this, just an out-of-date technology. But he recognized, he did say that, that kind of, the modern switching, just as you related, just the modern switching equipment of the 50s allowed you to make long distance calls, using area codes. And he always mentioned it, so I always think about that, but I never thought, I don't know if he thought it was an important building, but he thought the technology was an important milestone, quickly eclipsed,
But the transition from requiring a human operator to patch you through to the automation was a huge shift. I hear what you're saying, Brian, and maybe this is where this is where the historical commission comes in and says, we have the expertise, or we at least have more time to think about this, and they can say, yeah, this is an important thing for these reasons, and then we consider it. In terms of future use and whether it meets our design guidelines, one of the things that could be done, say, if someone comes forward with a plan to renovate it, is, the future planning board could say, well, you don't have enough windows, put in some more windows, but keep them in the same style as the building so it doesn't look out of space. So the idea would be to renovate it to meet the current standard of living that people expect, and you're never going to get away from this large brick building that's, tilted. But then again, we're never going to probably see 955 Main, which is this enormous large brick building, which is also not, parallel to the street. One of my concerns is that we don't lose sight of what the history of this part of town is, which is it's a somewhat industrial, working class area. And I think that somehow we have to make sure that we don't lose sight of what it was, because that's an important part of this town's history. And I don't know, we've lost essentially all of the factories are gone. And we had some pretty big ones. They're gone. They burned down or whatever. And there's a lot of people who don't understand that this town was not always like it is now. And there were reasons for the change. There was a reason, for instance, we no longer have trains at ground level going, or, at grade level going through the downtown. I mean, and so, but understanding the history is important. And we do that through buildings. So
Yeah,
anyway, but
a thorough and passionate defense. Do we want more time to think about this? I don't think it takes a huge lift. I think we just have to add it to our presentation when we present the article, and I'm sure we have to print something up. I'm sure there's several steps we have to take. So the earlier we know that we want to do this, probably the better. Do we want to take a vote on this now, or do we want to wait until the 29th? Can we vote on this now, or should we wait until, do we need this in a public hearing because we're changing an article?
I don't think we need it in a public hearing because we're proposing it on town meeting floor.
Okay.
So we're amending the article. I would ask the board, does it need more information to make a decision on this? Could we ask Jack or the historical commission to provide us with some more background to help us with our decision?
I think we have the essential pieces, which is that it's a building that housed a historic shift in modern technology that was built outside the requirements for imposition of a demolition delay, but may be worthy of drawing the attention of the Historic Commission if changes to the building is proposed. I think we have a basic understanding of the burden that Woodard would not put on anyone who chose to develop the building, and I think we have a basic understanding of what that would promote or limit for what we're trying to do with these bylaws. What am I missing?
You want to know quickly what a developer would think about that building?
Mm-hmm.
It's got really high ceilings,
Mm-hmm.
really positive. It costs a fortune to get rid of it. It's a very strong building
Mm-hmm.
because all that switching was very heavy,
Mm-hmm.
far beyond what it can handle whatever current standard there is for floor load. You look at it and you think, if I could make those windows bigger, I bet I could come up with something really cool. And the parking, it all kind of works. Like you look at it and you think, you could spend $300,000 getting rid of it, or you could do what work with it. The only thing that's missing, which would, is the windows. The windows, they were just to provide a little natural light. But, anyone can see that. You're not gonna want to tear it down if that's the only piece of land you have to work with, because the siding is just about perfect. Anyway. That's what I
Okay,
was-
so. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. I appreciate that, John. Is there any other information that folks feel like they would want to have on hand before we would vote about how we want to handle this property? Or do we feel like we're ready to take a motion now? Hearing no major concerns, if someone would like to make a motion about whether or not we amend the article to include the Verizon building, which is located at 954 Main Street, I would take that motion.
Well, I would move that the planning board add the Verizon building at 950 more Main Street to our list of historically significant buildings in the North Main Street zoning.
Thank you, Diab. Is there a second?
Second,
Is there further discussion? Okay, by roll call vote, Diab,
Aye.
John,
aye.
Nick,
Aye.
Brian?
No,
I'm an I on this one. I think Diab won me over, so it passes 4-1. Okay, so we will figure out how to add that to the article on the floor of town meeting. I think that is everything I was hoping to get to tonight. I think everyone knows what their homework is. Is there anything else anyone wanted to bring up this evening? Yes, Brian.
I have been informed that the select board was believed that doing the EFA is a worthy need, but they would like the request to go to the finance committee for a reserve fund transfer request before they consider whether they want to use ARPA funds or any other sort of funds that they have control purse strings of. So that is where we stand at the moment. So just thought I'd
Okay.
share that.
Okay, and I think additional information that we have discussed about this that we could share with the board is that our previous liaison to FinCom, Eric Demare, I think is now the vice chair of FinCom. So we should have a new liaison. We don't know if that person's been designated yet, but we can send a request and ask Eric as our former liaison, or if he knows who the new one is, and ask the chair of FinCom if they'll consider that request. If it's not successful, we still have some time to go back to the select board to ask for ARPA funding by the end of the year. The funds would have to be designated by December 31st and spent, I think, in 2 years or 1 year by 2026. Is that right?
I think it's 2 years.
Okay, thank you for pursuing that. We'll keep at it. Taylor added the original covenant and the ZBA decision to the ledges folder. He sent us a link to those documents, so we should be ready to have a quick vote on that at the public hearing on the 29th. We know we need to send comments by the end of the weekend to the architectural design guidelines, and if there's nothing else, I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Well, I would,
Second.
sorry,
Oh, go ahead, Diab.
I was trying to find a little clap hand icon here so we can thank Taylor for doing that.
Yeah,
I
thank
was
you. That was very
unable to do
prompt.
so. So there you go, Taylor. Thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for that information, Taylor. Thank you, WinCam, for bringing us live to millions of viewers. Thank you to Cheryl Dennis, our recording secretary, to Ian Sexton and Taylor, our town planner and assistant town planner, and all of our devoted fans and talented supporters. Are you moving to adjourn? Do you have your fingers up? Who's our number one fan that I need to name?
Oh, it's Henry.
Hi, Hen.
I think we already had a motion in a second. I just wanted to make sure we didn't miss the roll call vote. Does anyone want a story behind Henry?
Yeah, we do.
Taylor, I think it was the very first day you started with us.
It was.
Sally
It was
and-
my first day. Yeah.
Yeah, Sally, Taylor, and Sally Dale, former planning board member, Taylor and I were having lunch out on the common. and we met Henry and his father, who were coming for a stroll. And Henry, we were told that Henry was an avid watcher of planning board meetings.
I love
He
it.
really, he was, and he actually wanted to get a picture with us. He was, so it was like, I hope Henry, I believe Henry wanted to work in this field. I don't remember. It was, my brain is, I don't have my memory shot, but if Henry's out there, it was amazing. He was just like, so he knew exactly who we were.
That's awesome.
So
I love it. All right, well, if there's no further discussion on the motion to adjourn and Henry's greatness as our fan, roll call vote, Diab,
aye.
Brian,
Aye.
Nick,
Aye.
John,
Aye,
and I am an I as well. Thank you, everybody, and good night.
good night.